I found my faith. I just took a few minutes, and I knew that it was a challenge that I could overcome. I was given a challenge I knew I could overcome. So it took some deep breathing, um, a slice of pizza, and I think everybody's calm now.
There you go. You're applying some of the positive learnings from last
Hmm.
episode.
Yeah, yeah.
So last time, for folks that didn't hear it, we got into the overlap, the intersection between ADHD and religion, and why some ADHDers why many ADHDers tend to be less religious, like the things that tend to push them away from religion, as well as a couple factors that can actually make neurodivergent people very, very religious, and some of the positive protective effects that religion can have against some of the harder parts of neurodivergence, like just the daily struggles and the lack of community. Today, we're going to be diving deeper into that same topic, but this one's going to be more of a lens of autism. We're now looking at studies that look at the overlap of autism and religion. And I'm really excited for this one because there's a wider breadth of religions that are covered. Last time was a little bit more of the Western religions, but the studies we have for you today are a lot more. We get into like Hinduism, we get into like tarot reading and horoscopes and stuff. Like there's a lot more breadth today.
Wow, yeah, I'm excited about this one. But it had me wondering, what what does Eastern and global religions, New Age belief, and horoscopes have to do with autism?
Yeah, so they all view autism with a particular lens. Uh, and so let's start off, first of all, with a study that talks about whether autistic people can even be religious, which is kind of a silly thing for them to even look into. Um, but they did it.
Is this
They're
another one? Are they is this another version or flavor of theory of mind? Are they like, can animals be are dogs religious? Are artistic people as religious as dogs and squirrels?
it is, yeah, as usual, they're publishing studies for things that we didn't ask for. And as we found, we cover this in our episode, Why Won't Autistic People Kill Kittens, as well as our the eyes test episode. Autistic studies just tend to be more offensive than ADHD studies.
Yeah.
So
So
and part of that is theory of mind. Part of that is some of the powers that be, like Simon Barrett Cohen, who are kind of the face of autism research, have this thing called theory of mind, which we explain in great detail in the eyes test. But the TLDR, for those of you who haven't heard that episode, is that as kids develop at ages 3, 4, 5, 6, they develop theory of mind, which is the understanding that other people have different knowledge and beliefs than you do. So, for example, they get better at recognizing like the learning needs of other kids. Like you'll see older children teaching sets of rules for longer than younger children. They'll explain the rules better. They'll recognize more errors because they understand that the other kid doesn't have the same like framing and context that they do. And so like that's one very small example of theory of mind developing in kids. And so some of these lead autism researchers, like the most prominent in the world, say that by necessity, autistic people cannot have theory of mind, do not understand that other people have independent knowledge and context and understanding and mentalization than we do. And that's their like unifying theory for what they think causes autism, which is of course silly. Again, we go into it in a lot greater detail in that other episode. But basically, they have said because they've found this trend that autistic people tend to be less religious. It must be a theory of mind issue.
Is there any hope for these autistic people? Tara, will God ever reach them?
So per this theory of mind theory, no. The theory of the atheist autism comes from the notion that religion and spirituality require a cognitive faculty, this is a direct quote, that seeks purposeful intentions, wishes, thoughts, and emotions in others' minds. That is, to mentalize in a teleological framework. This is precisely what individuals with autism cannot accomplish in light of classic interpretations. So basically, they're saying that autistic people are unable to ask the question, like, what is the purpose of something, rather than like the direct cause. Um, I would argue that you and I, me being an autistic person, are doing some of that right now and displaying that ability. But I wasn't part of this study, so
Yeah.
uh
How can this be possible, Terry? You can't possibly perceive religion or God. How are we having this conversation?
yeah, it is. That one's a, a real head scratcher. So basically, yeah, there are a number of studies that say that autistic people just can't possibly understand religion. There was even a paper that they cited called "Mentalizing Deficits Constrain Belief in a Personal God." And so they're saying, like, wow, we have this trend. A lot of autistic people tend to not be religious. It must be that they simply are not capable of it. Um, so that's fun.
So one,
This is just
so
such a
one,
common theme.
yeah. So once again, it's them. It can't possibly be anything that religious organizations are doing that might somehow make people feel othered or like they don't belong or like something's wrong with them or if like they don't fit in. It can't possibly be anything wrong with the church. It
And it
must
can't
be.
possibly be anything wrong with the studies either. It is definitely the fault of the autistic people. Yup. Yeah, this is a common theme on our podcast. Like the more that you dig into these autism studies, the more that you see this kind of crap like over and over and over. And so this intersection of autism and religion is no different. So now, luckily, not every study is like that. There are better ones. I didn't just come here to give you guys a pile of crap and say, good luck, see ya. We have a little bit more to say than that. So other studies do show that autistic people can have rich inner lives, and actually coupled with our sensory differences, we experience spirituality differently. So again, I want to give a disclaimer. We're not trying to say that any one religion is like right or wrong or valid or not valid, or that you're like imagining things or anything like that. These papers are just from like a purely academic standpoint, and so that's the approach that we're taking. So I just want to caveat that because I don't want to invalidate spiritual experiences for anyone. But basically, what this study looked at was like we have more sort of rich sensory differences, which can actually feel more like talking directly to God or talking directly to like a spirit or an angel or stuff like that. Um, and so we are actually more likely to have what you would call like a spiritual or religious experience. So they say their results concluded that we do not conform to popular expectations that autistic minds are less adapted to experience supernatural agents, and it's instead argued that imaginative autistic individuals may embrace religion or fictive agents in a search for socially and emotionally comprehensible interaction. So basically, um, they think that we're actually also more likely to have this experience because when you're talking directly to a spirit, an angel, a god, it's not dependent on stuff like facial expressions or intonation, or anything like that. You're not having to read God and understand what that other party is thinking or feeling in the moment, you can have a more direct relationship that transcends physical cues. And so, and this is a very stable relationship. It's not fickle. Like, and so they actually found it is somewhat common for autistic people to embrace these types of spiritual relationships given the stability and given the fewer constraints with having to read like body language and stuff.
What I like about what that quote said is that first of all, it acknowledges uh, the uh, what does it say? Oh, it acknowledges the imaginative side of autistic individuals, which I think is great. And then it
It's
strips
almost
away.
like they actually talked to autistic
Yeah,
people.
yeah, right. And then it talks about the spiritual relationship. It strips away the dogma. I think a lot of when we were talking about we were talking about the church in our ADHD episode and religion. A lot of I think a lot of like the dogma and church practices and there are certain aspects of religion and structure that I think push certain neurodivergent people out. But that doesn't mean that that's exclusive to it's an exclusive relationship to spirituality. It's fascinating when you start to think about the spiritual relationship because I think I while like I don't have a great relationship with the church or any specific dogma. I do think that spirituality is something that can be experienced outside of a specific like religious affiliation.
Okay, if I don't necessarily buy into this sort of punitive God, because that was truly one of the hardest things for me to stomach is um I'm very sensitive. I have a lot of autistic people are actually hyper empathetic. It's a very common misconception once again, because of Simon Baron Cohen, that autistic people lack empathy. Many of us are actually very, very empathetic and have an overabundance um, of affective empathy, which is the ability to involuntarily experience the emotions of someone else. So, like if you see someone on TV in distress, you also physically feel those emotions. It's not like a choice; like you feel that, which is can also be incredibly disruptive. But anyway, when I would read these stories about um, like even animals being slaughtered in the Bible, and trying to like kill children and stuff like that, like that was so deeply distressing to me that I was like, I can't. Like I remember having these thoughts like I can't endorse, even if that is the God. I don't know that I can get behind that. I tried to think about like, well, what would a relationship look like with a God that I did feel good with? And so for a while I would sort of like try to talk to God directly, um, but like my version of a God that was maybe a little bit more empathetic and a little bit more sensitive to the suffering of people.
Yeah, a lot of that is a lot of the Bible is brutal, right? And so it's tough for people who are extra sensitive and extra empathic. And I think you can have a spiritual relationship without necessarily needing a relationship with a specific dogma or deity. Now, that sort of like um, one omniscient God is very present in like what we now have as like Western religions, right? You see that in like Christianity primarily, but there are other. I feel like towards like Eastern religions, right? There are other religions that are not Christian, obviously. So like I'm I'm wondering how what is how do non-Western religions look at or portray autism?
Yeah, yeah, because we in the last episode we covered pretty thoroughly like how Christianity and Judaism can view ADHD, but yeah, this is not universal. So autism can actually confer unique benefits in terms of your ability to practice religion. Um, So in like Hinduism, for example, separation from the social world and family ties left behind are among the most precious values. Preoccupations with religious objects and materials, like systemizing and memorizing sacred texts, working on clay icons, and rhythmic stereotyped movements during rituals, are critical elements in the immersion of religious and spiritual spheres. So, and this is all taken from a study that we'll have linked. So your very autistic traits can actually make you a better practitioner of Hinduism, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, it sounds like, especially through some of those like rhythmic movements, um, and some of the like hyper focus elements, uh, and doing things with like working very deeply on some of like those clay icons, right? Doing things with your hands seems like things that lend itself to
Yeah.
autism, right?
And again, I do think some of it holds true, just like what we said with Christianity. If Hinduism was not your hyper focus, but you were Hindi, I think the same would hold true, where it would be very, very difficult to probably go and memorize the sacred texts. But if it's something that you care about, if it's something that you hyper fixate on or that is a special interest to you, that would certainly make it easier. So, they also have stuff more about Christianity in this autism study. So, in her groundbreaking book on autism, Uta Frith mentions the case of Brother Juniper, an associate of Saint Francis of Assisi who probably had autism. He preferred seesawing for hours instead of social participation, interpreted the Franciscan principles of poverty literally instead of taking a mentalistic symbolic stance, and he was stripped naked with stereotypical movements. So I think that's a really interesting example of someone who, a historical figure in Christianity who was probably autistic, and that we can probably assume that that was somewhat of like a special interest for him, and the very literal interpretation of the texts um, made him viewed as a superior practitioner of Christianity. So,
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of when we were talking about OCD, and if it was gone undiagnosed and untreated, I can imagine a view on that where people can see like, oh, this person is like really into they're doing they're doing a good job, like they're really taking it seriously. I can see where a view of autism, if somebody's getting really into it, where it might look like this person's like a really great member of the church, right?
yeah, they're like, wow, Brother Juniper, he's like really, really Christian.
Yeah.
um, in Judaism, learning and following God's commandments is of fundamental importance that may help autistic individuals bypass God's person-like mental states to focus on the ritualistic behavioral aspects of religion. So basically, our unique way that we look at the world is helpful in Judaism because you don't have to be as bogged down with um, the the human traits that are portrayed of God. You can look past that and just and rely more on the rules that were set forth on like how to be a good person. So um they conclude this study of saying, indeed, novel ethnographic research suggests that individuals with autism have a distinct and unique understanding of religious ideas and supernatural concepts with a high level of systemizing and conceptual architecture. So we're actually quite good at understanding the conceptual elements of the religion, which in my opinion, and I'm certainly coming from a biased perspective here, that to me feels like the more important part, rather than getting bogged down with these particular rules and details, like understanding the entire conceptual architecture. What are we trying to get at? What are like how is this whole thing architected? Um, that to me feels more like the spirit of the religion
Yeah,
itself.
yeah, it's the systems, right? And that totally makes sense. Understanding the systems behind it, all of the concepts. So it's starting to sound like it's starting to sound like autistic people can indeed perceive religion, right? It sounds like they can actually participate.
Perhaps autistic people are capable of religion after all. Uh, one might even argue that some of us are quite good at it. But they did have a similar conclusion to the ADHD study we talked about, where autistic people get pushed out. So they say sometimes children with autism are excluded from religious activities. For example, they refuse to receive communion because they did not understand the meaning behind this ritual. So um, pretty much verbatim the story that I told about
Yeah.
how I didn't understand the body of Christ thing because I was like, it's not literally skin. It
Hmm.
is bread, and they didn't appreciate that take. So yeah, like no no qualms with this statement. Like I'm like that this pretty much sums up my childhood religious experience.
Yeah. You didn't vibe with the
I,
magic skin bread.
I did not say the right words about the bread. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So but yeah, so you know, given my perspective, I would say it's probably more likely that children who are autistic get pushed out of religion and not that we are just incapable of conceptualizing.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So now that I think now that we've like talked about the that autistic people do in fact have the capacity, a capability for understanding religion. We've been talking about Western religion a little bit. So, what about various religions, other religions? This paper um, cited what 144 different studies, right?
Yes, they talked about a lot of different framings. And so just again, another disclaimer, I did not dig into these 144 studies. So if something sounds inaccurate to like your experience, uh, let us know. But this is what they said. South Asian Muslim immigrant families understood raising a child with autism in religious terms. They strongly contested expert views, which they saw as undermining their child's development. The parents emphasized their children's innocence and purity as a religious value, a gift from Allah. One of the mothers interviewed in the study held the conviction of reincarnation and thought that her son was in his last rebirth. He had not committed any sins intentionally and consequently would attain salvation. Among some South Asian Muslims, children with ASD are viewed as very high spiritual beings because of the transmigration of their souls. So this is kind of a very interesting one that I want to unpack a little bit. Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So this is like the complete opposite of what we've been talking about, right? Instead of being pushed out, they're sort of it's like there's an understanding or not quite a welcoming, but like a reverence. It's kind of beautiful, right? It's kind of like there's something nice about the way they're perceiving autistic people. It might maybe it's a little infantilizing in some ways, but it's at least it's like a more positive spin than like, oh, there's something wrong with you. It's like, oh, there's something special about you, and that I think is the interesting part. Like that, there's something special about you, and wanting to explore that.
Yeah, I don't 100% love this perspective, but I would certainly take that like positive like framing any day over the very negative like there's a moral deficit that you need to fix. But yeah, I think you hit on it as well. Like it couldn't be a bit infantilizing. I worry anytime. I wish the world wouldn't take such extreme perspectives on autism. I wish that people wouldn't um put us on a pedestal and say we have superpowers because um that's unattainable, right? Like and it also can be infantilizing. It's very constraining and it makes you feel bad when you as an autistic person who supposedly has superpowers has a tough time, right? Like,
Right. Right.
so that can add this sort of like toxic positivity pressure to things. But on the flip side, treating us as like incapable or less than or broken, like, I don't know. I would take the positive side 10 times out of 10 as opposed to the paper that's like, you're not even like capable of perceiving a God. Right. So,
Right.
so
Right.
it's definitely like it's in a better direction for sure.
Yeah, it's always either like what's wrong with these people? We have to figure it out, or like they're superior wizards that we'll never understand and they won't even understand. But somewhere in there there's middle ground, right?
And it's like, what if we're just people?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, what if we're just people who just have a hard time communicating sometimes?
They dug into some other religions. So, Jewish ultra Orthodox mothers in Israel interpret autism from both biomedical and spiritual religious points of view. Metaphysical and moral accounts, with a particular reference to the transmigration of souls and suffering, link God's mysterious ways and biological mechanisms underlying autism. So, I appreciate this one from the perspective of like, they're not denying science. Because that is also a theme that we've been seeing where the parents and communities are rejecting the science of these conditions altogether, and either saying like you need to just work harder, or like not acknowledging that there are brain differences. And um it's not so much a big deal, I guess, with autism as it is with ADHD, because with ADHD there are literally medications that can really benefit people, and so you're very much hampering people from like getting access to appropriate treatments. But with autism, that is still problematic when you reject the science side, because not that you want to like medicate autism, not that you could. There are no autism medications, but you can get support through coaching, therapy, stuff like that. Even occupational therapy, just for help addressing some of those like daily pain points and daily challenges. And so I think anyone who is taking a more science-based, like biomedical grounded approach is probably going to be more open to some of those things that can just like ease the load of autism a little bit. Like those therapies can um help the bad parts, like help the challenges a little bit.
Yeah, so it's like understanding that there might be more at play here, a genetic component maybe, but it's something more than a problem that we just have to pray away, right? This isn't just pray away the autism. It's like, oh, this person's actually wired differently, and so how do we adapt? How do we work together?
Yeah. Yeah. This next one I thought was pretty funny. In Latino families, mothers often reported that their children were blessing, tests, or signs from God. So that one really covers just the full spectrum.
Oh yes, yeah, yeah. Blessing for sure. Test. Yes, yes. Latino kids definitely testing their mothers. My mom is Hispanic, so definitely we are my brother and sister and myself. We definitely tested my mother. Um, yeah, and the signs from God. I mean, that sort of plays into the Catholic side um, of Latino upbringing.
Were you in particular a blessing or a test?
I think I was a blessing. My my brother was a test for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Oh man. Yeah, I think that's funny. I think the only problematic part in there for me would be if a parent is telling a kid like you are a test, like God has given you to me to like challenge me, um that can't feel good. But
I don't think I grew up hearing that, but
yeah,
definitely
so
I could definitely see that being phrases that come up.
yeah, hopefully the Latina mothers in this study are not telling their children that they are tests. And then finally, kind of moving beyond these world religions, um, we should talk about how new age ideas can impact autism in families. There are a lot, like, everyone out there is trying to explain autism except for like the actual root causes, which are just brain genetics and brain differences, right? Like it, you can see like gray matter differences and stuff on a brain scan. Um, Not that you can diagnose it though, which we also have an episode on. I like that we're getting to the point where we're like, we've already covered this. Like
Yeah.
we don't have to do all the groundwork. But we know that autistic brains are different, right? Um, and so people just find so many other ways to try to like explain autism. Like people can't handle our existence and like are like, why are they here? So I don't know. But they explain it through karma, reincarnation, spirit possession, toxication, and extraterrestrial experiments. Um, and that can lead to very harmful treatments when they're trying to cure autistic people based off of these various rationale that they've come up with, including like hyper specific restricted diets, which can get into the territory of, being unhealthy, getting malnutrition,
Yeah. Eating
refusing
disorders.
vax exactly. And eating disorders are more prevalent in autistic people as well, uh, which we are definitely going to be covering in an upcoming episode. So um, yeah, not a good territory to get into in the first place. Um, Refusing vaccinations is another very common one that you hear about, and we are very much seeing that play out on the political stage in the United States currently. Other ones include purgation and exorcisms, and so um, it's unfortunate that people are like constantly trying to cure autism. I understand that there are parents out there with very, very high support needs, kids who truly have the best interests at heart for their kids because they want to alleviate any suffering that could come along with being higher support needs. However, um, they can end up doing very real harm to children by coming up with these kind of wacky explanations and then doing treatments based off of it and like cause physical and mental harm in trying to help. And so, I would hope that parents get better over time with like evaluating that trade-off, even if they have these very strongly held beliefs that like, oh, my kid is possessed or whatever.
I mean, as a parent, like the very empathic part of me, it's got to be terrifying, right? If you're a kid and you're just like, a lot of tantrums come from not being able to express yourself effectively and being overstimulated, right? Something else is going on. Um, but I can only imagine, like, as a child who has trouble expressing themselves, uh, needs something, com- ex- overstimulated by the environment, having a meltdown, and then like someone's coming in and like, oh, you're possessed. Oh, there's the devil in you, and trying to exercise that. Um, as a neurodivergent parent with kids who are very likely they don't have the kids don't have any diagnosis of anything yet, but like they're they. They're plausibly neurodivergent, and there are times when my
The genes do be there.
oh yes, yes, yes. And so there are meltdowns that do look like, man, my kids sure seem possessed at times. And it sure would be easy if I could just call a priest here and come and like exorcise those demons away. But as I kind of talked about a little bit before, sometimes a little bit of deep breathing, some grounding, especially for overstimulation, being able to ground yourself, ground the kid somehow. Sometimes I'll take my daughter outside and just like we'll look at a tree, touch a tree, right? And so it's being able to like feel something while breathing can calm them down a little bit. And so like luckily I haven't had to possess any demons, but that's sure how it's felt sometimes.
Or unpossess
Yeah, yeah.
the children. I think what's interesting with these, right, is because you can go online, you can find accounts where people are like, no, like I swear to God, this cured my child. And we we saw this as well with the episode we did on what actually causes autism, and people believing that Tylenol paracetamol or acetaminophen, depending on where you are in the world, was causing birth defects, and causing like autism and ADHD. Um, they will do these treatments and see improvements. And so they're like, the treatment worked. But actually, um, autistic kids can still hit developmental milestones at atypical speeds. And a lot of these sort of treatments are happening at an age where they're going to start hitting milestones. And so sometimes the kid will like get better because they are growing. And so it's one of those things where it's correlation and not causation. But because you are doing it at a sensitive age, people are thinking that they have found causation, and so that's kind of really the root of where you get these large groups of people trying these like alternative treatments. Is they like other parents saw success, like they saw their kid who previously couldn't speak is suddenly verbal, or things like that, and it's like actually the ability just kind of came in, like
Yeah,
it was nothing more than that.
it's developmental, and that's where you got to ask, like, what else could it be, right? What else could be going on here? Um, because otherwise it can be harmful, right? If you're constantly trying, and I think that's like the thing we're kind of we're saying and talking around. It's like when you take that approach of like, what's wrong with this person? We need to fix them. Harm comes from that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's both physical and emotional, right? Because you think about exorcism, like, okay, sure, that's better than like the the crazy injections. Like one of the things we talked about on that other episode is like parents will do injections of um chemicals that are used for chemical castration. And they're like, oh, my autistic kid's here. So like that is obviously like, holy crap, that is so bad for your kids' health and safety. Exorcism, you're not injecting them, right? You're not like putting a harmful substance in their body. However, there's emotional damage, there's psychological damage
Yeah,
that's coming out of that, because when you're sitting there like telling your kid that they're possessed, um, that's impactful, right? And then I'm sure an exorcism is probably kind of scary to sit through, like to have a preacher, like, you know, from what I've seen online from exorcisms, which is admittedly mostly just from like a Nathan For You episode, but like having a preacher like yell in your face like, get out, demon, get out, like that's like scary. Like I would be so like I would have nightmares about that. And so there's psychological harm to be done there.
absolutely. Well, I think the other thing too, it's the thing that's hard as a parent is when your kid is like one stigmata away from like full on demon possession. When you're witnessing that, like your instinct as a human is to like tell them, is he'll stop. No, right? It's like if the kid's acting out or doing something that could hurt themselves, it's hard to tell what they're in control of and like what they just don't understand about themselves, or like you know a kid can be very fidgety, or even like be or needing stimulation, and they'll do things that can look or appear harmful, and sometimes it is, especially if they're like having communication issues and harming other kids. So your instinct as an adult is to like yell stop and no and don't. The problem is though, like especially when you're exhausted, it's hard not to fall into that. But if a kid hears no, don't, stop, that's wrong, you're bad, and they don't understand, and they're not intentionally doing bad behavior, that sticks with them. Like that's a source of like of long-term trauma, of like them thinking there's something wrong with them. And so like while the instinct it can sometimes be like yelling no or stop, sometimes what the kid needs is like help calming their bodies down, right? Like help. They need to feel love. They need to feel acceptance. They need help calming their bodies down and getting grounding themselves to a point, because all of that anger energy that comes from being a parent, um, ramps the kid up even more. So if you're in an environment where it's happening, you're just going to ramp the kid up, and you're going to end up in that cycle where they're acting out. You're yelling at them. They're acting out even more. And then if you bring, like, an exorcist into the situation, right? It's just going to be more of that ramping the kid up. And so it's almost, in some ways, if you don't understand it, don't know what you're looking for. It can feel like confirmation bias. But if you know what you're looking for, and if you just try to have some empathy, then there are ways to help the kid cope and build skills. It's hard though. It's hard.
And I want to talk about that for a minute. Like, why might that ramp up, particularly an autistic kid? And truly, I think the answer is the hyper empathy. It's the abundance of affective empathy. Granted, I have not spent a ton of time around kids. I don't have kids myself, but I do tend to. Well, gosh, even with adults, I try to take the approach at times of like not adding energy to the room when it's already very intense. But autistic people, like, very much, not all of us, but those of us with the sort of hyper empathy flavor, um absorb the emotions of the people around us. It's, I know that might sound a little like hippy dippy, but your mirror neurons, there are actual neurons in the brain that are meant to detect the emotions of others, and to some extent make you experience that as well, because that's good for pack behavior. That's good for like empathy is good for human survival, right? So there are specific neurons dedicated to that, and so there are sort of theories that perhaps there's maybe a difference in the mirror neurons of autistic people, to where some of them might be over attuned, and so you experience it at a intensity that can at times be maladaptive. Like, I would say, I think my hyperempathy can be. I'm grateful for who it's made me become as a person, because I think it has made me a better person, in terms of, like, I am very much able to take on the perspective of other people, and care deeply about other people. If you come in and are adding a ton of anger and intensity, they're going to absorb that emotion and feel it themselves. I had a very difficult time understanding the boundary of my own emotions and those of other people, because I was also involuntarily experiencing theirs. And it's taken a lot of work as an adult to be able to sort out what do I feel versus what do the other people in the room feel, that is sort of being thrust upon me. Um, and so kid doesn't have the years of practice and context to be able to do that. So if you feel intensity, they're going to feel intensity. If you express anger, they're going to express anger back at you, because they are feeling it at the same volume that you are.
Yeah, and is it when my kids are acting out, and I'm trying to, like, sometimes, like, regulate myself and try to figure out what's the lesson here, or like how do we just, like, get to calm. The thing I have to remind myself sometimes is, like, the way they learn from the parent, right? And so however I am acting, they're going to mimic that in some way. So whatever I'm doing when I'm angry, they're going to do back to me. Right? So it's like, however I want them to behave when they're upset, I have to mirror that. I have to, like, demonstrate, here's what anger looks like for a male, right? Here's what your father being mad is and means. And it's not always easy, because, like, my dad definitely has, like, undiagnosed ADHD and had a very rough time with it. And so as a result, like, I didn't have a great example of white male rage from a father, right? So, like, a lot of it is me trying to correct that, but also understanding that there's so there are things that I've got to constantly, like, try to not just correct it myself, but also be able to, like, show to my kids, in order to, like, make the situation better, but also, like, what do I want them to take away from this? How do I want them to act when they're upset and dysregulated. And so sometimes it's, it looks like us working through that together at the same time, because the things that calm them down also calm me down. And so things that calm me down also calm them down. So I've got to always like try to remember that and navigate that and find ways through that. And again, it's not easy.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be challenging because, in most situations, one or both parents of a neurodivergent kid will also be neurodivergent. So they themselves are navigating like sensory issues and stuff. But we've been talking about other people sort of um, thrusting new age beliefs onto autistic people with the intent to cure us, right? But I guess the other question is, can autistic people themselves hold new age beliefs? And certainly the answer is yes. So similar to the study we talked about earlier of autistic people having these sort of rich inner lives and relationships with spiritual beings, another study showed that 63% of autistic participants had experienced touch without anyone being present. 47% had seen shapes, light, and color that were not caused by external stimuli. And then in comparison, of like a neurotypical control group, only 7% had tactile experiences compared with the 63% of autistic people, like where they feel someone touching when there's no one there. And only 14% had of neurotypicals had reported visual anomalies when 47% of the autistic people had seen those shapes, lights, and colors that were not caused by anything in the environment. So very tremendously large gap there um, between the experiences. And so that's again something that is so silly to me about that first study where they're like, autistic people just can't be religious. It's like, um, in some ways, I think if we were not sort of forced out of these religious institutions, we would probably be more likely to be religious because we have these reinforcing experiences, whether you believe that is truly from a spiritual being or whether you believe that is more on the side of just part of sensory differences. Um, Either way, that would you would think that that would be more personal evidence for you as an individual of there being some sort of spiritual entity. So I think that's just speaks to how decisively we get pushed out of these spaces.
Yeah. Yeah. If you think about it, if it was like, if the environment was more welcoming, they clearly, they would look more consistently like great members of the church, great members of the practice, because they're able to more sensitive to the stimulus, and possibly more likely to be abducted by aliens, right?
Well, I think something that's so interesting to me. So I go to I have a friend who she does lymphatic drainage, and I need that pretty regularly because I also have a very common comorbid autoimmune condition called mast cell activation syndrome, um, which we definitely want to do some episodes on that. But with autism and ADHD, you are far more likely to have autoimmune stuff. So at any rate, lymphatic drainage can help with some of the symptoms of that. But she is also probably undiagnosed autistic ADHD, and she's so hypersensitive to her environment and to me, and so like she'll be like, "Oh, your fingers are a little swollen," and I'm like, I didn't notice that." Like she's so in tune with my body, and she'll be like, "Oh, you I think you're experiencing pain like right here," and I like on my stomach or something. She'll touch it, and I'm like, "Oh, yup." Like that's wild. And she's from Bolivia. And so in Bolivia, from what she's told me, it's a lot more common to believe in like witchcraft and stuff like that, and uh, stuff that I think is less common in North America. And so through her lens, this is part of like um, like energetic forces like talking to her through my lens, I'm like, oh, I think that she has just high attention to detail, is highly precise, and just a high sensitivity to her environment, and is able to like use that to understand stuff. But what's interesting to me is we can both sort of take those different framings, hers being more of a spiritual, mine being less spiritual, and look at the same thing that's like objectively a talent of hers.
I love this take. Um, that I love this take that autistic people, because they're so highly sensitive, right? When you think about like um, sensory processing and highly empathic, right? If you look at it through that lens, I think the problem with how most of media and most of autism is talked about, it's all through these deficits. It's all through like flat affectation, and they can't possibly feel. They don't have theory of mind. But if we like just look at some of the experiences people have had, some of the conversations we've had, right? I love to take that they're more uh they because of the sensory processing and how sensitive they are, they can not only be more in touch with themselves but with others, to the point where where it's like, and I like that connection to spirituality, right? Because it's like it's that lens that you actually feel more connected to another individual, and like that story of like there's you're so sensitive that you not only know what's going on in your body, but you can feel things in my body that I'm not even aware of. Therefore, we are more connected. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of a cool take, right?
Well, and it's interesting too because she experiences it through um, what I would describe as synesthesia, right? That's not how she describes it, but um, she gets these like visuals, like she will like it's very weird because she'll notice when I'm like in pain, and she'll be like, "Oh, you're vibrating," and it's like green, and I'm like, "That's very interesting." But there have been many instances where she will like identify like a pain point for me before I've even told her about it, and she will notice these like little micro changes in my body, um, and it's very cool. Like I'm like, wow, like you're really good at what you do.
Yeah, yeah. It's cool. It's a cool take.
I think one of the other reasons why a lot of autistic people adopt new age beliefs themselves um, is that it's another way to feel like there's a cosmic plan. So to explain more what I mean, um, I have noticed, and this is all anecdotal. I don't. I couldn't find a study with like stats or anything, but I've noticed anecdotally a lot of autistic people are very much into horoscopes, birth charts, tarot, magic numbers, stuff like that. And maybe that's just like a generational thing. I don't know. So I could be kind of making stuff up here. Again, I couldn't find anything that had hard stats either way, but from what I have observed from other autistic people, um, I tried to figure out why, because a lot of people that I know that have these beliefs are like, I work in tech, right? And so more STEM based. So they're going to view the world from like a more analytical, science based perspective. And then they go home and they're like, doing horoscopes, right? And I'm like, like that feels incongruent to me just based off of their other world views. So I was like, what role is this serving? And so about a year ago, I went to like an ADHD retreat. Like it was a bunch of adults with ADHD, and we did these activities. And one of the people in the group did birth chart readings for us. And I kind of went into it, and I was like, yeah, I believe in this 0%. And then she did mine, and like they are super spooky accurate. And I was like, that is crazy. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about like how do I explain this through my conceptual solution, because I still don't believe in like birth charts personally or anything like that, right? Again, this is like, please no RSD, you guys, if you do believe in this stuff. Like this is not, we're not trying to make you feel like you're wrong for believing in this, but
Well,
I
I think
personally,
the fascinating take there is like for somebody that's like usually a skeptical mind and highly precise, that something like a birth chart, where does it fit into that? Or
Right,
where does it
exactly.
fit into someone who's skeptical and highly precise?
It's not to say that you are wrong for believing that. Yeah, that's exactly right. My take is more, given your other worldviews, it feels a little like out of place, just, based on the other things that you believe in. Um, and I really thought about it, and I think what's happening is these birth charts will give sort of 3 or 4 sentences per there's I don't know, there's like your moon sign and your sun sign, and like there's a lot of things, and they'll give a number
Yeah,
of
you're
sentences.
rising.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think there's sort of this confirmation bias where your brain is more likely to remember the ones that are super applicable to you. And what it does is feels like a sort of cosmic connect the dots, where you pick out these sentences that feel super relevant, and it can form this like incredibly detailed report on like your desires and your strengths and your weaknesses. And so my sort of take is that maybe this knowledge and this information was within you all along, but it's a lot to process, right? And autistic people are notoriously a little bit worse at parsing our own emotions for the reasons like hyperempathy, but also because we lack, many of us have challenges with interoception, which is kind of understanding your own uh, physical bodily sensations, as well as alexithymia, which is being able to connect like physical sensations to emotions. Um, and it's not static. It's not like, oh, you're 100% alexithymic or you're 0%. Like it's kind of abilities based. Like you can have better days and worse days and stuff like that. Um, but we struggle with that, right? Like the point being, we really struggle with sometimes identifying our own emotions, and you can extrapolate from that our own desires, our own sense of self, our own goals, like our own strengths. Um, and so if this information is kind of already within you, but you need a framework to pull it out. I actually think that birth charts, tarot, all of those things are like a really excellent way of creating like a connect the dots type of thing where you can then draw the line yourself and create the picture that was always there to begin with, but it just gives you that structure, like that additional structure that you may need to parse those feelings. So that was kind of my take based on my experience with that.
I love that read because, like, especially like as a framework, as a systems thinker, you need frameworks. Especially like having ADHD, I like having frameworks because they're shorthand or like they remind me of something or they help me like start solving a problem. So when you think about it less as like um this, you were born at a certain time and so all the stars aligned and therefore you're like set out to be this thing forever, which can sometimes be like that can be invalidating in some ways. If everything's already figured out, then where do I fit? But that read of it, like, oh, if it's a framework, and it's almost like a menu, and there's like structure here. Take from it what you will. It actually helps. It can help with processing. It can help with figuring things out. It can help with understanding yourself. It can help with like adding adding some structure. It's like having it could be similar to like journaling or writing things down or like having like a dopamine menu, the things that you like, right? All the things it can help align or help you articulate the parts of your personality, the things that are who you are that can otherwise be hard to express. And so when you look at it that way, it's actually pretty cool, right? Once you strip away like the magical part of it, unless you're really into magic and you want to believe in that, then cool, like no judgment by all means. But for those that might be more skeptical and want to know, like, why is this meaningful? How can I use it? There seems to be uh, another like valuable and meaningful lens to, uh, to horoscopes, to that kind of thinking. Because like, again, I read that stuff and I'm like, yeah, sure, like this could apply to anybody, right? But I think it's kind of the point. uh, because it's one of those things that sort of like I liked your analogy about connect the dots, right? It's the things that connect us, that help us find community, help us find commonality, and help us articulate the things that are hard to articulate.
Yeah, and I would even say that horoscopes, I think people gravitate towards them not only because it allows you to connect disparate data points about yourself into something cohesive. I think that it also helps you to understand the world around you. And so there's a very common stereotype that like all autistic women have developed a special interest in psychology, which I'm definitely guilty of that. Because a lot of us, and I think it's more common with autistic women because there's more societal pressure to be very adept in social situations. And that's why you see higher masking, higher CAT-Q scores in autistic women versus autistic men. Because of those societal pressures to develop these like adaptive mechanisms. And so learning psychology, that's kind of the life hack of like understanding how why are other people behaving that way? What's causing that reaction? And being able to create stability in a very chaotic world when you are born kind of without the ability to predict how other humans are going to react. That's so chaotic, right? So, psychology applies a framework that you're able to use so that you can have more accurate predictions, like 70% of the time or something like that. It creates stability. Well, I think horoscopes may serve a similar purpose for some people. Because, when people are like, that's such a Virgo thing, that's such a Capricorn thing, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
You're sort of short circuiting your understanding of other people because and we need shortcuts. We need short circuits. The human brain can't possibly learn every detail about every person everywhere that you ever meet. Like you have to be able to short circuit it somehow. So psychology is one way. Horoscopes just might be another way. So people can be like, oh, you're a Taurus. I can assume these 5 things about you. And so it takes off some of the cognitive load of just being autistic in a chaotic world where you are having trouble interpreting the intentions of other people.
Absolutely. Not to mention, it's a great conversation starter, and
Yeah,
it's fun,
that's true.
and it's fun.
That is also true. So yeah, so I think that's my personal theory, not based off of a ton of data, about why it seems like a lot of autistic people do gravitate towards like horoscopes and stuff like that.
Yeah, it tracks.
But John, should we close out with sort of a mind-bending problem? Did you know that there are actually certain horoscopes that are more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD?
Now, this is interesting because we just spent a lot of time like talking about the like the validity and the place of horoscopes, but so there are signs that are more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD.
I don't know anything about horoscopes. Okay, in my notes, every state in the US besides Connecticut, if your child is a Leo, they're significantly more likely to have ADHD than other signs, and a Libra is the least likely. But in Connecticut, the one anomaly, a Sagittarius, is most likely, and an Aquarius is the least likely. So, do you have any guesses why that might be the case?
So Connecticut's the outlier here. That's interesting. And what's kind of like what's in the water in Connecticut that the kids are coming out
They're turning
differently?
Sagittariuses into Leos over in Connecticut.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm on a Leo cusp, so that tracks. But it's developmental, right?
Yeah,
It's because they're
yeah,
catching it as the kids are developing, because they're different than their peers.
yeah, that's exactly right. They found that the effect was less pronounced and eventually disappears as kids in studies are older. So it underscores one of the major problems when you're only studying young kids with ADHD and autism, because basically what they're seeing is the brain develops so much in the span of 1 year for these kids that it's just so much more apparent. That a kid has ADHD or autism when they're younger in their grade because they basically have a year less of like prefrontal cortex development than the kids who are the oldest in their grade. And so they're just far more likely to get diagnosed because the symptoms of ADHD are so much more pronounced.
Yeah. And they're gonna seem more delayed in some ways as well.
Totally. And the thing with Connecticut it doesn't bother people like
Yeah, what's up
months
with
later.
Connecticut?
They have a different school cutoff date
That's
than the
what it
rest of the
is.
states. Yeah.
It's the different. Okay, so that's why. Wow. So it's still. So it's like it's more evidence that how it's
It's
being
very
taught.
decidedly the school cutoff date that dictates. It's like where they're different based on the school cutoff dates. Different countries have different school cutoff dates as well for
Yeah.
when your kid would be like allowed to start or not start school again.
Right.
So yeah, so
So it's
like
not the time of year. It's not the star sign. It's this. It's the system.
it's the system, yeah, and we see the gap close by the time they hit like high school. So this is very much just with like an effect that's observed with younger kids, but just so much of the ADHD literature is so focused on children. Like I believe it's like 10x of the funding goes to studying it in young children versus adults. Uh,
Wow.
so yeah, this is just another reason why it's like really important for us to start researching adults as well, because we may pick up on trends that are actually not trends at all and send scientists down this like crazy rabbit hole of like I don't think any scientists were like super uh, uh perplexed with how to treat the various star signs, but this can be extrapolated to other effects where they might be picking up on trends that just aren't a thing by the time
Yeah.
you hit adulthood, and it just all comes down to like developmental differences and like
Yeah. Yeah.
developmental speed and stuff like that.
Well, until we have better research and better researchers, you've got us to read the white papers. You've got Terry to read the white papers, to read the research, unpack it, make sense of it, and demand better.
Yes, yes. If this episode has showed you anything, there's again, I feel like I could conclude like half the episodes with this. We need better out of autism research. We need better. We need researchers who treat us like humans and actually talk to us and gather our perspectives instead of just assuming that we are not capable of things.
Yeah, but like the good news is, um, autistic people can be spiritual, and autistic people can speak with God, and they can also be atheist.
We can truly do it all.
And
What a world to live in.
it's yeah, what a world, what a world. Cool. If you listened to this far, by all means, give us a like, a subscribe. Really helps our channel, and it gives us this motivation and encouragement to keep reading these papers and demanding better.
Yeah, we really do. We really do read all your comments, and we really appreciate hearing from you. So thanks for commenting. Thanks for tuning in.